It goes without saying, but if you're willingly subjecting yourself to a horror film, you're more than likely going to see something truly messed up at some point. But even then, sometimes you do get a little bit more than you bargained for. I'm Josh from What Culture Horror, and today we're talking about the horror movie moments you'll never be able to unsee. First up, Olga's Dance, Suspiria 2018. When news broke that Suspiria, one of the genre's most beloved and highly respected films, was being remade, alarm bells began ringing across the internet. How could a movie as iconic and unique as Suspiria possibly be remade? Well, depending on who you ask, the remake was either a monumental success that breathed new life into the original by greatly expanding on its world into something different yet identifiable, or it was just a colossal waste of time, resources, and the talented stars attached to it. No matter which side of the fence you sit on though, everyone can agree that the scene in which Olga is subjected to the wrath of the witch's coven was truly disturbing. After Olga has a public meltdown and tries to escape the dance academy, Madame Blanc places a spell on protagonist Susie Banyan that will make Olga's body match Susie's movements. Susie then begins a dance that incorporates many violent and jerking movements, which causes Olga's body to twist and contort in the utmost unnatural of ways, culminating in a rather distressing scene where Olga loses control of her bladder and ends up as a crumpled husk on the floor. Nasty way to go if you ask me. Next up, the aftermath, Hereditary. After making a name for himself with his audacious short films, Ari Aster knew he had to leave a mark with his studio debut, Hereditary, and he certainly achieved just that. Not only is the film incredibly brutal in its depictions of familial trauma and grief, but its displays of violence and gore are similarly hard to stomach. Forced by his grieving mother to take his younger sister Charlie along to a high school party, Peter neglects his big brother duties and allows Charlie to eat some chocolate cake that happens to be filled with nuts, something that she happens to be deathly allergic to. With not an EpiPen in sight, Peter bundles Charlie into the car and races to the hospital. All the while, Charlie struggles to breathe in the back seat. Desperate for air, Charlie sticks her head out of the car's window and is then promptly greeted by a telephone pole that knocks her head clean off her shoulders. It's a shockingly visceral bit of violence that will stop many viewers in their tracks dead, but it's arguably the follow-up shot to this, which shows Charlie's mangled head swarming with ants, that's the real nightmare fuel here. Very much the definition of one scene never forgotten. Up next, Mother's Milk, Barbarian. Fresh off the back of his recent success with Weapons, writer-director Zach Cregger is currently the indie darling of the horror genre. But even though he saw great success with his sophomore effort, the impact on the genre of his debut picture, Barbarian, cannot be overstated. Merging overbearing suspense and biting satirical comedy could have been a cause for disaster, but Cregger managed to pull it off with aplomb, crafting a tale that simultaneously kept audiences on the edge of their seat and stifling chuckles. What starts as a tense scenario in which Tess arrives at an Airbnb, only to discover a man is already there and is claiming to have had the same booking, quickly devolves into a nightmarish experience with a grotesque woman who lives in the bowels beneath the house. There is all manner of gruesome happenings throughout the course of this film, a few of which could have definitely ended up on this list, but the moment that stands out the most is when everyone's favourite Scream King, Justin Long, is forcibly breastfed by the aforementioned monster. Well, waste not, want not, I suppose. Next up, the box cutter Green Room. Coming out of nowhere to widespread acclaim from audiences and critics alike, Green Room was one of the most surprising horror treats of the last decade. The film follows small-time punk band The Ain't Rights, who accept a show at a known neo-Nazi bar after another of their shows is cancelled at the last minute. The band's set manages to go off without anyone getting their head kicked in, but upon getting back to the titular green room, the dead body of a young woman is discovered, and things take a turn for the worse as it turns into an all-out battle for survival between the punks and the imposing neo-Nazis. There's plenty of grisly action throughout, with plenty of machete-based attacks, loose hanging limbs, and dog maulings to satisfy the gorehounds among us. But there's one scene that is bound to get an audible gasp out of even the most hardened horror head. During a struggle between the band members and a neo-Nazi known as Big Justin, drummer Reese manages to subdue Justin by choking him out, and that's followed up swiftly by Amber grabbing a box cutter and slicing open the big fella's abdomen, an act that we see in shocking, uncompromising detail as the blade tears through his flesh like it were butter. Next up, what happens to the men under the skin? Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin is a damn fine film, marrying together body horror, existentialism, and a true sense of British foreboding into something wholly unique and infinitely mesmerizing. The picture follows a nameless woman played with eerie precision by a career-best Scarlett Johansson as she travels around Glasgow in a white van, offering random men on the street lifts. Only once they're inside the car, we see the seductive power that she has over these strangers, convincing them to follow her to an abandoned house in the city outskirts. And for the first hour or so, the audience knows little of these men's fates, other than they're slowly submerged into a thick black liquid that the woman herself seems impervious to. Before long though, the truth is revealed as we see just what this goo actually does, and the only way it can be described is as if a tiny vacuum of space removes all of the men's insides in an instant, leaving nothing but a thin blanket of skin hovering in the darkness. It's a truly harrowing scene that's perfectly punctuated by some stellar special effects, something that'll linger in your mind long after the credits roll. Next up, the ear pull Megan. Considering its light and campy tone, you probably wouldn't expect Megan to feature anything too disturbing. But much like the killer robot herself, there are far nastier things lurking beneath the film's seemingly child-friendly exterior. Designed to be the ultimate best friend for Katie, a young girl suffering from the loss of her parents, the titular doll soon starts taking her programming a little too seriously and begins making violent threats towards anyone who dare to harm her new best friend. So naturally, when a nasty young bully decides to target Katie at a local gathering, Megan steps in to protect her. And at first, the young lad laughs at the doll, even going so far as to hit her. But ever the calm and collected machine, Megan takes all of this in her stride before then grabbing the boy's ear and pulling it far outside of the limits that an ear should go, all in graphic close-up detail. Violence towards kids is always something that gets a reaction out of an audience, and it's especially effective in a film where, up until this point anyway, it has been a fairly light thrill ride. The effect used to show the ear stretching also needs shouting out for just how gross and bizarre it looks. Next up, the delivery inside. One of the most extreme entries in the new wave of French extremity movement that set the horror world ablaze back in the early 2000s, Inside really goes as hard as you possibly can without putting anyone in jail. It tells the story of Sarah, a heavily pregnant woman whose husband recently died in a car accident, which both she and the baby miraculously survive. Cut to Christmas Eve, and Sarah is about to give birth as she laments the loss of her husband at such an emotional time of the year. That is, until a crazed woman shows up on her doorstep and demands to be let inside so that she can take Sarah's baby. It doesn't take long for this unnamed woman to break into the house itself, where a whole host of violent and gory shenanigans ensue. The most outrageous act comes at the end of Inside, however, when a bruised and battered Sarah goes into labor on the stairs. There, she tells her attacker that the baby is stuck, so naturally, they resort to a rudimentary cesarean via scissors that's shown in shockingly graphic detail. Not one to watch whilst you're expecting, that's for sure. Next up, the baseball kid, Dr. Sleep. Mike Flanagan had a Herculean task ahead of him when he adapted Stephen King's Dr. Sleep for the big screen. Not only did it need to remain somewhat faithful to King's novel, it also had to act as a functional sequel to The Shining, both the book and the film iterations. Against all odds, Flanagan managed it with aplomb, and Dr. Sleep remains one of the, ironically, most slept-on horror films of recent years. Fans praised Dr. Sleep's performances, its well-spun narrative, and the gorgeous recreation of the iconic Overlook Hotel, but similarly, they'll be quick to drain of all colour when thinking back on the awful fate that befalls the baseball kid. It's made abundantly clear from the get-go that the True Knot, the film's antagonists, have no issue in killing children in their pursuit of obtaining their steam. However, what starts off as implied nastiness soon becomes a grim reality when the group abducts and viciously stabs a young boy to death in full graphic display. The scene is made even harder to watch due to its unrelenting brutality and a performance from Jacob Tremblay that's perhaps a little too convincing. Any parents in the audiences may want to fast forward this one, and I know that's 2 kid-related horrors in 2 entries. We'll do something slightly different next. Next up, The Chainsaw Massacre, Terrifier 3. In all honesty, the Terrifier series could populate literally every entry on this list comfortably, so narrowing it down to just one is quite the task. The now infamous bedroom scene from Terrifier 2 shocked and appalled audiences in equal measure with its unrelenting brutality, but it's the sexy time shower massacre in the 3rd film that truly goes above and beyond the realms of acceptability. Randy college students, sorry, it's the Austin Powers Britishness in me, Mia and Cole decide to enjoy some afternoon delight in the communal showers of their university, but are soon interrupted by Art the Clown, who's brandishing a chainsaw. What transpires from there is one of the bloodiest scenes ever put to screen, with both victims hacked apart by a gleeful Art. The real cherry on top of this gory cake, however, is when Art decides to insert the chainsaw into Cole's backside and then proceeds to split him in half right up the middle, all shown in very graphic close-up that highlights Terrifier 3's insane practical effects. In typical Terrifier fashion, the disgusting nature of the scene is swiftly undercut when Art, who is very clearly proud of his handiwork, lies down on the flooded floor and starts making a blood angel, grinning from ear to ear the whole time. And to finish, we have the scalp and split Bone Tomahawk. Few scenes in modern cinema have made people look away in abject disgust quite as much as this scene from Bone Tomahawk. For those innocently unfamiliar, Bone Tomahawk is a horror western hybrid that sees a posse of gunslingers led by Kurt Russell's Sheriff Franklin Hunt trying to rescue some kidnapped locals from a tribe of cannibals that live in the desolate wastes of the Wild West. Naturally, things turn ugly pretty fast when the 2 opposing groups collide, with all manner of murder and bloodshed going ahead. That said though, there is one scene in particular that unfortunately lives rent-free in almost everyone's heads. After being captured by the tribe, our questionable group of heroes is then forced to watch one of their ranks be viciously scalped. That alone is pretty horrifying, but it's swiftly followed up by the scalped man then being held upside down, whilst a tomahawk splits him right down the middle, crotch first, all the while the other 2 tribesmen pull him in half by his legs. Off the back of Bone Tomahawk, director S. Craig Zahler has become known for garnishing his films with shocking examples of ultraviolence like this. Though even with that said, nothing else he's ever put to film has quite matched the potency of what Bone Tomahawk was able to achieve. This is truly harrowing stuff indeed. So that's our list. Are there any entries that you would have included on here that I missed off? Let me know in the comments, and if you want more from What Culture Horror, click one of the videos on screen right now.